One might think that I'm going to say it's iris season, but I can hardly say that because we've had iris in bloom since Thanksgiving. All winter long, the Algerian iris and a few other things bloom whenever there's a mild spell, and then certainly starting in late winter, there's a lot of bulbous iris that bloom into early spring. And there are a lot of iris that are done blooming right now already. A lot of the iris down here in the Sunken Garden are Louisiana Iris, as are these two right here. You know, if you need cultivar names, I know the label is on that edge. I think it's like Here and Again or something like that. What's that?
Now and Forever.
Now and Forever is this lavender one. Thank you very much. I can't store all those cultivar names in my head. The Louisiana hybrids are derived from 3 or 4 native iris that are native to the Mississippi drainage area. They only started seriously breeding them maybe in the 1940s or so. They are spreaders. You see, you know, I don't know how many plants were planted to make this mass. It could have been one plant. They do spread. Their wild parents are native generally to wet woodlands that are seasonally flooded in the winter and then get shady and dry in the summer. So the Louisiana irises are sort of almost dormant in the summer. The foliage they have now gets shabby. We strip all the foliage off in, well, by midsummer, late summer, and then they put up new growth in the spring and then make use of the moisture and the sunlight that's available when the trees are leafless in the winter, and then bloom this time of year. You can see they're growing right out into the water. They love that, but they do not have to have that. You can grow it anywhere where the soil has normal moisture. I would not recommend them for a dry spot, but just average moisture or better is fine. Quite a few cultivars around here. You know, you can find the labels on most of them, but I'm going to point out some other iris. This is also derived from native species. This is a selection of Iris robusta. It's a cultivar called Dark Aura, I think for the very dark stems, which are fairly attractive. Iris robusta is a hybrid between 2 other native species, Iris virginica and Iris versicolor. We'll see a cultivar versicolor over there. Those 2 species are more northern origin and east coast as opposed to the Mississippi River Valley area. And where the populations overlap, they're hybrids. This might be a man-made hybrid, but the hybrid Iris robusta occurs in the wild as well. It's a little bit more modest a spreader than the Louisiana hybrids.
What was the name of the one that you've got in your hand and that there were 2 labels?
Yeah, it's Origeron.
Origeron. Okay.
Daisy fleabane. Yeah, Origeron pulchellus.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, labels get a little bit confusing at times. Yeah. Alrighty. Yeah. Right.
Doug, I can't tell if it's a leaf, a fruit, or whatever, but the red, the tree behind.
Oh, it's shedding last year's leaves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're very red. What is that tree? I'm not going to remember the name immediately. This is a real pretty selection of a Louisiana iris called Geisha's eyes? Yeah. Irises typically have 3 falls and 3 standards that are upright, but in here they've all become petal-like, so it's like it has 6 petals. I really love that yellow center to the leaf, to the flowers. Behind me is Iris versicolor. Iris versicolor, another native iris. This is a cultivar called John Wood. The typical color in the wild iris versicolor would be blue violet. This is a lovely red violet. This yellow foliage here is real interesting situation. There's a group of hybrids called Iris sudata. They're hybrids between two species. The European yellow water iris, which is Iris pseudochorus, which is one that, it's absolutely gorgeous thing that we should not grow because it's a very prolific seeder, and in the wild, just last night I saw a little pond between here and Cary that was just absolutely ringed with it, because when it gets in a pond it tends to colonize the whole edge. But when you cross the yellow water iris with the Japanese iris, and there's an example of a Japanese iris over there, you end up with something that is sterile, like a mule is sterile when you cross different species, but has these really late blooming flowers that look a lot like a single Japanese iris. And there are some cultivars that are in bloom. I know there's one in the sun garden, the Souto garden. But a curious thing is a lot of the hybrids also have yellow foliage in the spring. It'll green up as summer goes on, but it actually can be a ornamental, what term do I want? It's sort of an ornamental asset in that you can combine this yellow foliage with foliage colors. But really beautiful things. Well, yeah, I'm gonna go point out this Japanese iris. Well, and I'm going to stop here first. This is one of the wild irises native to the Mississippi drainage area. This is Iris Lord. I knew it earlier this morning. Oh well. Do you see the yeah, there you go. Yeah, Nelsonia. I should be able to remember Nelson, yeah. But the other parrots have much larger flowers, but Iris Nelsonii and Iris fulva have small flowers, but from those you get these red pigments that you see in some of these hybrids. The other parents, like Iris brevicollis and Gigantus cerulea, are blue flowered. So you have these different parents with different flower colors, so you can have these Louisiana hybrids with a wide range of colors. This is an older Louisiana Iris cultivar called Black Gamecock. I like its smaller stature than the great big ones. Oh. Don't step through the beds like I did. This is a Japanese iris, and it's one of the last of the major groups of irises blooming. I always get depressed when the iris season ends, but then I move on to my daylilies. And this selection, and I don't remember the whole name, I know the second part of the name is Zakora, which is Japanese for cherry blossom. This one has three falls, three of these drooping petals. What's even more favored by Japanese iris fanciers are ones with 6 falls. And this one is an exceptionally large flowered one. But they are clump formers. This does look like it's become a big mass, but it's like about maybe 5 separate plants that have become big clumps. So they're one that's, always stays in bounds in the garden. And like the Louisiana irises and others, it likes moist soil, but as long as it's average moisture, not dry, they'll do fine. Now, if you see pictures of Japanese iris in Japanese gardens. They're often exhibited grown in a pot, and then the pot is set in a pond during their bloom period, but that's not where they grow most of the year. They will tolerate standing water, but that's not what they really want. But they're real easy. And there's a real pretty one called Silver Band that has a prominent amount of white striping in the foliage. It's a really colorful foliage plant. And its flower is pretty small, but that represents, the wild form of Iris insata. Questions on any of that? I have a Crinum behind me. I looked for its label this morning. I didn't find it. I think it's Crinum powellii, but the Crinums are almost indestructible, sort of southern heirloom plants. Though a lot of people are breeding Crinums nowadays, so there are a lot of new selections. And they're close relative of Amaryllis. They have a great big bulb underground. Some of them are really big. And they tend to get better the longer they're in one location. They can certainly be dug up and divided if you want more of them, but it's some plants, stop blooming well, like some daffodils won't bloom well once the bulbs get real crowded, and you need to divide them and separate them. But Crinums tend to just get better the longer they're in one location. And you can often be out in the country in the south and see a row of Crinums where there probably was a house at one point, but the house had long gone away, but the Crinums are persisting. This is sort of an average sized Crinum. A lot of them are great big mounds, almost 5-6 feet wide mound of foliage. So they're something you need to place properly in the garden, but really worthwhile, especially blooming through the summer. Some of them have the most delicious fragrance. One of my favorite ones is on the edge of the pond, but it won't be in bloom for quite a while. The fragrance is so good, it's better than having dessert. This is James Hendry. That's one I would definitely have in my garden. I'm happy to continue if people want to. I don't know, what time is it?
Yes, please.
What? Oh, the Kalmia? Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to step through the garden again. I'll scold you if you do, but that's to save us all time. It's Souto Zakura. Can you see that? I don't know what Souto means. Zakura is cherry blossom, or cherry at least. What?
Same thing. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And it's not one we currently have for sale, but the display gardens often function as stock blocks for the nursery. So there's so much of this, it would be easy enough to dig up a clump or two and divide it up and have it for sale in the future. Okay.
Are you going to do the full standing?
We can head there now. Yeah. That's Mrs. James Hendry. Mrs. James Hendry is the Crinum that I said has the world's best fragrance. No, I'm not talking about facts, but personal opinion. But another nice thing about it, it's a much smaller mound of foliage than your typical Crinum. Oh, I think Lydia wanted me to show you this mountain laurel.
They're so cool, yeah. So,
okay. This is mountain laurel. Mountain laurel is Kalmia latifolia. This is a cultivar called Keepsake. Now, mountain laurel is native well into New England. I don't know, might even extend into Canada. And down into, I might imagine it goes all the way down the Appalachian Mountains. In this area, like along the Eno River in Durham and Orange County, it's real common on the bluffs, on the steep hills above the river. And people often talk about that the provenance of a plant is important. It's not going to do well if the plant wasn't derived from where it's being grown. And I think a lot of times that's not terribly important, but I've planted a lot of fancy mountain laurel cultivars that were selected in New England. And the best they ever looked was the day I bought them, and then they slowly disappeared over several years. But there are some cultivars, and obviously this is one that do really well for us. There's one that Woodlander's Nursery in Aiken, South Carolina used to sell called Pristine, that was collected in South Carolina, and that does extremely well for us. So find out if you're searching for mountain laurels, find out if it's a cultivar that does well for us. They're in the same family as rhododendrons and azaleas, and I don't know if it's going to behave for me. But the stamens, you see the shape of the flower. Do you see the little like bumps on the bottom of the flower? The stamens are back in there, and maybe this is a flower that's already pollinated. So when an insect lands on the flower, the stamens snap forward, and then I guess the pollen ends on the back of a fuzzy bee or something. Then it gets carried to the next flower. But worthwhile evergreen shrub with a very showy bloom this time of year. If you don't know mountain laurel, the wild ones are mostly white with some of this red spotting in the flower. This is not you wouldn't find one in the wild that looked like this. Though I guess this one probably was originally found in the wild, but it's not a typical color form of the plant.
What is this tree?
This is a mimosa. This is a purple leaf form of the common mimosa. What is the cultivar? Chocolate fountain, maybe? No, Merlot Magic. Let's see. Yeah, mimosa. The common mimosa is a serious invasive exotic. You see it all along roads in some areas. Short-lived, showy tree. Hummingbirds love the flowers, but somewhat serious of invasive. It's not shade tolerant, so it's not ever going to take over our woodlands. So it's somewhat invasive, but I don't think it's a super serious one. And
is it related to a sumac? It looks like
no. Mimosa is actually in the legume family with peas and beans. It's an odd family because and at times people who classify plants have broken the family into smaller families because it doesn't have the typical pea flower like a pea or a bean does that a lot of the legumes have, like the Baptisias, has that powder puff flower that doesn't look at all like a pea or bean family, but the pods are just like a bean pod.